I'm Julie Davis, Education Coordinator for the Viking Sewing Machine Company, and I'd like to welcome you to the wonderful world of serging. Today I'd like to point out some of the really neat features on your Huskylock 900, and also I'd like to take you through the handbook and so some techniques that you could use as you're serging to make your sewing a lot easier. First of all, I'd like to point out what a serger actually does. As we open the front panel, you'll see something that's different on a serger. Sergers work with loopers instead of bobbins. You'll notice as I turn the hand wheel, you'll see the upper looper moving over the top, and if you have your fabric underneath the foot control, it'll be moving over the top of your fabric. The lower looper, on the other hand, moves underneath your fabric. The two needles that you see here will go down and catch that stitch. So actually a serger works on the edge of your fabric and sews twice as fast as a sewing machine. We'll go back to the loopers a little bit later, but inside your control panel, you'll see on the left is your adjustable differential feed, and we'll talk about that too when we're serging on knits and when we want to alter our feeding system a little bit. In the center is your adjustable stitch length, and to the right is your adjustable stitch width. In the side panel, you'll see that there's a white knob. The white knob, if you press in and turn down, will retract your blade. Now, I rarely retract my blade when I'm actually serging. The way that I use this the most is actually getting in there and brushing out the lint. On the front, the levers that you see are your tension controls. You'll notice that there is a shaded area from 3 to 5 on each of the tension controls. Your upper looper is your green tension control, your lower looper is blue, your right needle is red, and your left needle is yellow. The shaded area is the normal sewing area, so most of the time you will be sewing in this area. Now, if we look on the top, you have a dial. The dial is for your adjustable presser foot pressure. What this does is it adjusts how much pressure is actually exerted on your fabric. So if I turn this counterclockwise to a higher number, it will grab my fabric tighter. So if you're working on a heavier weight fabric, you need to adjust this to a higher number so it'll grab your fabric and move it along. Now, on the contrary, if you're working on a very lightweight fabric, you want to adjust it the other way to a lower number. If you look towards the back, and I do have my thread pulled down at this time, but before you start serging, you will need to raise that thread pull. On the back, you have your thread spools, and we'll talk about thread a little bit later, but you have your upper looper, which is green, your lower looper, which is blue, your right needle, which is red, and your left needle, which is yellow. On the side, this is your presser foot lift. What I really like about the Huskylock is that you can hold your fabric with your left hand and actually raise the presser foot with your right hand. So that's actually a handy place to have this. If you look down from your presser foot lift, you'll see your hand wheel. Your hand wheel, which turns towards you just like a regular sewing machine, will move your needle bar up and down and move your needles up and down. So if you need to raise your needle or lower your needle, this is where you will do that. Now, I'd like to also point out some electronic features of your Huskylock 900. One of the electronic features, and you can see it, is the light. It's called a pilot light that's right in the front, and that will tell you that your Huskylock is on. If you have your presser foot up, you'll see right below that pilot light that there's a blinking light, and that blinking light will say your presser foot is up. If you tap on the presser foot or try to sew with your presser foot up, what will happen is you hear that beep, it will beep and say, put your presser foot down to sew. There's also a safety device on the Huskylock 900. If you happen to, and we hope not, hit a pin or something that's too heavy to go through, what will happen is it will grab it, it will automatically turn off, and then it'll once you lift your presser foot again, it'll start sewing again. That's just so you don't jam it up with fabric or jam it up with pins, we hope not, and you can continue once you unjam it and then start again on your foot control. Now, the switch for your light is right above your presser foot, and you pull that towards you to turn on your light. Your power switch is on your right side, right under your thread holders. When you turn your Huskylock on and off, it will give you a beep saying, yes, I am on. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to go through some threading with you. I have the cones on here. We wouldn't usually use 4 different colors of thread to serge a seam with. However, I want to use 4 different colors so that you can see how you alter your tensions, or you can see where your threads lay on your fabric. You can, too, use the normal small spools of thread or your European spools of thread also, just by taking off your cone holder. And this is done just by pulling up and off, and then you can slide your regular spools on or your European spool on and use it this way. So you don't have to use the big cones of thread for everything that you do. One thing I do like to point out too is you do want to use a very good quality of thread on your serger. Serger thread is a little bit finer than regular thread. You do want to look at it and see if there's any fraying, then it's a poor quality of thread. You want to make sure that it is a smooth quality thread, and you'll have a lot better luck. Now, your threading order, you'll want to start with your upper looper thread. And for this purpose, my upper looper is green thread, and my upper looper tension slot is marked with the green strip. Your thread guides up here you must go through before you go to your first clip. The way that you get through these middle guides is you want to go from the front so that it doesn't get a twist in this. From the front and just drop. And then you can grab your thread and continue threading. The first guide I'll want to go into is the clip and then down into the tension discs. Now the nice thing is when you have your presser foot up, what happens to your tension discs is that they open up. This allows your thread to seat properly in your tensions, and you won't have to do any pulling or tugging at your threads later. For your first thread, and your threading order will be upper looper, lower looper, right needle, and then left needle. For my upper looper, I've gone through my first guide, through my upper looper slot, down around, and you'll see that there's 2 grooves you want to go through, and it has an arrow on the groove, so you want to go through that top groove, through the thread guide before the upper looper, and I'm making it so you can see that upper looper very clearly, through the upper looper guide, and then I like to clip off my thread so I have a nice clean edge and go through my upper looper eye. You can, at this point, in your accessories, you do have tweezers. If it's more comfortable for you to use tweezers, feel free. The next thread that I want to thread is the lower looper. I want to go around, this one you just have to go around the outside of the guide. Through the first clip guide, down into the slot, remember your tension discs are already open, around through the bottom slot this time, and it does have an arrow, it says take the thread this way. Now, when I turn my hand wheel towards you, you can see you have a lower looper thread guide, and it's a little white box and it has arrows going both ways. Instead of having to throw thread around any cutting system, all you need to do is just pull that thread guide to the right, set your thread into the well, and then just push it back. And then all you need to do now is put it through the lower looper guide. Now I like to position my lower looper so it's on top of my upper looper, so it hides the upper looper, because all I need to do now is just put it through the eye of the lower looper, push that thread up, and just grab that thread. Okay. Now, that was simple. Now let's just go to your needles. The first needle you want to thread, actually I do want to keep this open, and that's a good point. It's a little bit easier to thread your needles, and when we're going to be removing our needles, to open that front cover, because that'll make it easier for you. There is a little protection guide for the cutter, and that'll move that away, making it more accessible to you. Now for my right needle, again I want to go from the first guide, drop to the back, bring it forward, through the right needle clip at the top, and through the right needle slot, around, and you'll see that there's a red line and a yellow line that marks where this thread goes. So I'll go up and around, through the guide before the needles, and then through my right needle. Again, I do like to cut off my thread and make it a nice clean cut before I have to do this. Okay. And then just grab it from the back. Now all your threads you'll want to take to the back and to the right. So underneath there's an extension on your foot control. I always take my threads to the back and underneath this little extension in the back. Now for my last thread, I'm going to thread my left needle, very similar to the right needle, through the slot, around, and through the guide before the needle. I'm going to cut off so I have a clean cut, and through the needle. Oops. That's the hardest part. Okay, and to the back. Again, if you'd like to use tweezers for this, you can. I find it's pretty accessible anyway. Okay, now I'm going to do a stitch. I'm just going to test and see. Remember to put your foot control down, or your presser foot down, and then just see if it forms a chain. If it forms a chain, then yep, and it does. You're doing fine so far. Now, if it doesn't form a chain, what you'll want to do is you'll want to go through and check and see that your lower looper is threaded and your upper looper is threaded. I'm going to start on the sewing portion now. In your handbook, and this is an optional handbook that you can get from your Viking dealer, we're going to start from the part 3, which says sewing techniques. We want to do just a basic 4-thread seam. Now remember, for a basic 4-thread seam, it says grab a piece of medium weight woven, a piece of lycra, and a piece of denim. And this will show that it really does a wonderful job going through all these different types of fabric. And remember to check and see that all your tensions are in the shaded normal area. I like to keep all my tensions just on 4, and that's what we'll consider our normal tension from now on. Let's run a stitch here. Looks good. Now you'll see the normal stitch you'll want, and this is what it does, is it forms right on the edge of your fabric. Your left needle sews your seam together. Your right needle acts as a safety stitch, so you have a nice stable seam. Your lower looper underneath is the blue one, forms the stitch on the lower side. So you have a 4-thread serge. Now if I grab my lycra, I'll do the same thing, and I'm also going to take my denim, see how fast you can really sew a seam, plus it overcasts your seam at the same time. Now what I suggest you do, if you have your book, is paste these in your book, so if you want to refer to them later, you can. The next technique I'd like to show is called a 3-thread seam or an edge finish. Now there are some times that you want to keep your seam allowance in there. For instance, in a shoulder seam, you might want to keep your seam allowance in there to press it open, or any place where you would want to press a seam open. What I like to do is just serge along the edge, and I'm going to do this with a narrow 3-thread seam. What this is doing is it's sewing with one needle, an upper looper, and a lower looper. You could actually do a wider 3-thread serge too, just by using the left needle only. Let's do a edge finish here. The advantage to using your right needle only for an edge finish is you get a lot narrower seam. See how narrow the seam is? And it's a lot lighter on the inside. The next technique I'd like to do is securing ends, and I'm going to just thread my left needle for this. Let me open my cover, which makes it easier. Thread this needle. By the way, if you're doing a lot of edge finishing with your right needle only, I would, in real life, take out my left needle, and that'll actually save wear and tear on your left needle. One technique that we use is called securing ends, and we use this on a seam that's not going to be covered by another seam. It's not going to be covered by any other stitching. For instance, if you do the flat method of ribbing, of the ribbing application, what you'll want to do is start your seam. When you get one or two stitches into your fabric, what you'll want to do is raise the presser foot, bring that thread tail around, okay, in front of the cutter, and then continue sewing. What that does is you will sew over your thread tail to secure that end. Now for the end, what you'll want to do is go one stitch off, pull your fabric towards you, away from you, and off of the stitch finger, and then around about a ½ an inch. Since you have tension release, remember I said those tension dials open up and your threads release, you can actually pull that fabric forward about a ½ an inch, and then put your presser foot down and stitch over your previous stitching. See how that secures your end at the end and at the beginning. Okay, what we've been doing so far is we've been basically sewing a seam, and just to review what we've been talking about, to do your seam on a serger, and these are just little mermaid shorts. These were made twice as fast on the serger as they would on the regular conventional Viking. Inside you'll see the seam, and this is actually your serged seam. It seams and overcasts at the same time. Now, what we did talk about overcasting your seams too, this is a skirt, a 1-hour skirt, where we've actually serged the edge of our seam first and then sewn the seam with our conventional Viking. We haven't said too much about stitch length and stitch width. Inside the control panel, what you'll see is actually your suggested stitch length, stitch width, and differential feed too, and we'll talk about that later. The next page, we're going to be working with adjustable stitch length a little bit. Generally speaking, the heavier the fabric, the longer your stitch length you'll want to be. I have my normal stitch length at 3 because that's where my shaded area is. So if I want to do just a regular seam on medium weight woven fabric, that's where I would want my stitch length to be, either 2.5 or 3. what we're going to do in this next exercise is actually show how you can change the stitch length. I'm going to open my control panel, and again, when you move the levers either for the differential feed or for the adjustable stitch length, what you'll want to do is actually push that lever to the right and then adjust it either up or down. Now I'm going to start with my stitch length at R, and actually R stands for rolled edge, and we'll be doing a rolled edge too. I'm going to adjust my stitch length from R up to 5 as I serge down my 6-inch piece of fabric here. So I'm going to set to R, and I'm going to stitch just a little bit, and that's a very, very short stitch length. Then what I want to do is adjust it higher as I go, and this will show adjustable stitch length. Adjust it a little bit higher. Now this should be at normal on 3. Adjust it a little bit higher to 4. And then finally to 5. And there are plenty of uses for adjusting your stitch length. See how we've adjusted our stitch length from very short to the longest stitch length. The next thing within your control panel is your adjustable stitch width. Let me take my stitch length back to normal for the time being. And actually throughout the handbook we will be adjusting the width and the length and the differential feed to show different techniques. The adjustable stitch width, which is the far dial on the right, we're going to do in the same manner. Now it also goes from R all the way up to 7. I'm going to start at 5 and show how the width actually changes. It will move the blade over as you stitch. Let's go about 1/3 of the way down with 5. Now I'm going to adjust the stitch width to 6. Go a little bit farther. And then I'm going to adjust the stitch width to 7. Stitch width is basically the same too. Generally speaking, the heavier the weight of your fabric, the wider you can actually go with your stitch width. See how my stitch width gets wider from one end to the other. Let me take my stitch width back to normal. Our next technique, if we use tricot, a lot of times when you're sewing on knit fabrics, what happens when you serge a seam? And I'm going to just serge this at 5 because it is a lightweight fabric. And I'm going to adjust my stitch length to 3, and I'm going to serge down one edge. My tensions too are still all at normal. What happens many times with the fabric that's stretchy like a tricot is that you get some looping off the edge. Now this one's not too bad, but with sweatshirt fleeces and with tricots that are a little bit stretchier than this, you get some looping off the edge. If you'll look at the stitch width dial, you'll have a 5, then you'll have a triangle, and then you'll have a 6, and then you'll have a triangle. Now what this does, and if you watch the cutting system, and one thing I do want to point out about the cutting system is it's so nice to have a scissor action coming from the bottom instead of an actual cutter coming up from the top. Your visibility is much better and your cutting is much better. It's more efficient. If I have my stitch width at 5, it will be in the narrowest position for this type of sewing. If I go in between, what it will do is it'll actually move the stitch finger without moving the knife. What this will accommodate for is your knits, and it will encase more of your stitching within that seam. So what happens is you get a more, I would say a better fit along the edge here. And you get more fabric within your seam. Okay, for our next technique, Outside corners are very important when you're using decorative threads. A lot of times in garment construction you'll have to turn corners. There is a neat way of doing this. Now I want to take my stitch length anywhere in between 2.5 to 3, and I think with chino I'll just take it to 2.5. And my stitch width, I think I'll have it 5. Now to turn an outside corner, what you'll want to do is just serge with barely cutting, and when you get down to the end of your seam, take one stitch off of that edge, pull the stitches actually off of the stitch finger, and the stitch finger is the portion that your stitches are forming directly over. Pull it off of the stitch finger. Since you have tension release too, you can pull that a little bit farther if you need to. I want to turn it around. I'm going to put my presser foot down. Now before I start serging again, what I want to do, since I've pulled some slack into those threads, is actually come above and tug that tension out of actually all of them, and then just continue sewing. See what a nice edge that would make, especially if you were using decorative thread. Okay, and this is your turning corners. Now, for an inside corner, what you'll want to do is cut an inside corner, and I do want to point out where you would use this inside corner technique. Let me grab my 1-hour skirt again. I love making these 1-hour skirts because they are a 1-hour skirt. When you get to the kick pleat, there is a portion where you have to serge actually the edge, and it is an inside corner. And there are other places in garment construction that you need to do that too. To do this, you need to make one straight line out of your serged edge. The reason being is if you look at your cutter will be a 1/2 inch in front of your stitching. So if you get down to the corner and you continue to stitch, your cutter will be cutting your fabric before you can actually stitch that edge, or the seam if you're doing a seam. What's necessary is if you get down to right before, I'm about 5/8 inch before the corner starts to turn, I'm going to keep my needles in my fabric. I'm going to raise my presser foot, and I'm going to make this all one line. I'm actually making that corner a straight edge. Now you'll be holding a few little folds over on this side, and that's fine. And then continue to serge that edge. And you'll see how this just bends right around, and you can serge an inside corner without cutting any of your fabric. For a slit, and this is basically an extreme inside corner, a slit you would use for the placket in a blouse, for your cuff, or the placket in the back. You could do this with a regular serge edge, a 4-thread serged edge, or you could do this with the rolled edge, and we'll show you a rolled edge a little bit later. The way that you do this is you will start serging. Again, it's the same principle where you serge down one edge, make a straight line. Now you'll have to take a few little tucks in your fabric to straighten this edge. And I want you, it will help you too, is if your stitch width is on the narrowest width for normal sewing, which is 5, and my stitch length again is at 2.5, and I made one straight line out of this placket, and I'm going to continue sewing. Now, see how you can just go right around the corner? Now, if you get a little tuck in there, that's fine. You can try it again, or you can take out the serging in that one little portion, and you'll be fine. Our next technique is a wonderful technique if you're doing, for instance, sweatsuits, or if you're doing pants, pull-on pants, that type of thing. This is a little skirt. It's called a casing, hem, or it can be just basically a hem too. But what we've done is we've actually serged a casing in this skirt and inserted elastic. The way that you would want to do this is take a piece of fabric, do the hem fold, and we'll be working with a blind hem too, but this is how you do a blind hem fold, or if you're going to do a fold for your casings or your self hem, you'll want to press up as much as you want that hem or as much as you want that casing, and then take your fabric and fold this back. When you do this, let me do that again. Press up your hem, take your fabric, and fold this back. The part that you're going to be serging is this portion. You're going to be cutting just a little bit along this edge, and your needles will be going right into this fold. Okay. If you're doing this in the round too, you can make a little notch, for instance right here, for your cutting blade. That'll give your blade room to get in there, and you can actually, let me go up a little bit farther, get your cutting blade in there. If you're going to serge all the way around, you do remember want to leave a little hole though to insert your elastic if you're going to insert elastic, or to do, if you're doing a case, just a basic hem, you won't need to leave a hole, of course. I'm just serging, I'm cutting off that little edge and I'm stitching into the fold. Okay, what this does is now from the right side, you can actually open that up, and this is where you'll put your elastic. So it's a really, really fast way to do a casing in your skirts or in your sweats or in your pants. Okay, this next technique is a really neat technique. It's the ribbing application, and actually ribbing you can apply to either knits or to woven fabrics. You need to stretch your ribbing on as you apply it, and I'll do that, but this is one example of ribbing application that's been serged on. Very, very fast finish to do, and like I say, you can do this on wovens too. Let's take a little piece of ribbing and a piece of sweatshirt fleece, and I'm going to fold this in half. Let's do it on the grain like a regular sweatshirt. Fold this in half, and I'm going to cut a little mock neckline. Just fold it in half and cut in a curve. Then you have a little mock neckline. I'm going to fold my ribbing in half. I'm going to just hold these together at the top. Now, for a knit, and I do like to point this out, for knits and for heavier fabrics, I do like to lengthen my stitch length. So I'm going to lengthen my stitch length to 3. And I'm going to keep my stitch width right at this point in time at 5. And I'm going to start on one edge. Now don't stretch your ribbing until you have your needles in your fabric. Okay, my needles are down in my fabric. I'm going to raise my presser foot. I'm going to, again, this is kind of like an inside corner where you have to make that curve a straight line too. Take my ribbing and I'm going to stretch my ribbing to match my curve. You don't really want to stretch that curve, but you want to stretch your ribbing. And then I'm going to serge. Now what I usually do is I stop at some point and I reposition my fabric, stretch the ribbing to match the curve, stop. This will make it easier if you haven't done too many ribbing applications. Just stop and reposition at points throughout. See how this looks like a little mock neckline? Okay. And the nice thing about a serge seam, when sewing on knits or sewing ribbing is that this serge seam will stretch, actually even more than a conventional sewing machine. It'll stretch with your ribbing and it will return, plus doing it twice as fast. Now, what we're doing later on is we're applying a lettuce leaf edging to ribbing. So if you want to do an extra one of these right now while you're really good at it, you can do one, and we'll apply the lettuce leafing later. For the decorative thread edging, I'd like to point out too that there are several, actually many different types of decorative threads, and I have some here. This is a YLI candlelight. I'm going to put in my upper looper for a decorative thread. You can use woolly nylon. This is the metallic woolly nylon. You can use rayon threads, like so. Now, I do want to point out that if you use a rayon thread, this rayon thread tends to slip a little bit. Within your accessory bag, you have what we call thread nets. What you'll want to do is put these thread nets, as you put them over the spool pin, over the top of your rayon thread. And for these little short ones, I like to bend this over. Or actually for your woolly nylon, sometimes I put this on woolly nylon too. But what these will do, what the thread nets will do, is they'll allow that thread to stay put on the spool, plus it will reel off a lot faster. So we'll just place those thread nets on as you put it on your spool pin to allow for an easier thread delivery. You can use metallics in your upper looper. It's basically unlimited what you can use. Let me just clip my upper looper thread, and I'm going to take off my spool holder. Just pull that off. If these are a little bit difficult to pull off, what you can do is take a little drop of oil, which is also in your accessory bag, and you can apply just a little drop of oil to the cone holder, and it's a lot easier to remove. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to actually tie these. Now, you'll notice that decorative threads are a little bit thicker than regular threads, and we'll talk about adjusting your tensions for a thicker thread too. However, I like to either tie these so it'll pull it right through. Actually, the Huskylock isn't very difficult to thread, so if you want to rethread, you can do that too. But I'm going to take my upper looper tension to 0, and I'm actually going to pull this through, or you could actually stitch, but stitch slowly, and make sure that your knot goes through. It goes through a little bit easier if your upper looper tension is at 0, and I see that it is through. Okay, for my stitch length, for decorative threads, I like to adjust my stitch length just a little bit longer, especially if it's a thicker thread like the candlelight. Another thing that you will have to do, usually, I won't say all the time, is you'll have to reduce that upper looper tension to accommodate for the thickness of the thread. Let me search and let me see if my... You always want to with decorative threads too. I think I'm going to adjust my stitch length just a little bit longer to 3.5. And a lot of times too with decorative threads, I like to adjust my stitch width so it's at a wider width. So I'm adjusting my stitch width to 6, and I've adjusted my stitch length to 3.5. Like I say, you want to do this on a scrap first to see how your tensions for your upper looper. This is really beautiful. And see, I've decreased for the candlelight my upper looper tension to about 1.5. So I am accommodating for that thread just a little bit. Now see how your decorative thread, this is a metallic type of thread, so it really is beautiful. Actually, I do have it around my jacket too. And other ways that you can use decorative threads around placemats. This is using a rayon thread, okay, on the upper looper and on the lower looper for a placemat. Okay, many different decorative threads that you can use. Now, while I still have my decorative thread in my upper looper, I'm going to do what we call safe lock. Now, a safe lock is, we'll talk about flat lock, but a safe lock is actually doing a seam on the front side of your garment. This is actually a seam. It's not a flat lock like we're going to talk about later, but this is a seam done with my wrong sides together. And I'll show you how that's done, but this is done with knit crocheting with my stitch width on all the way on 7. So it really is beautiful in a wide width. Let's take a piece of sweatshirt fleece. Okay, and really for this technique I do like to clip my right needle. Actually, I'm going to remove my right needle completely. Then I won't have that extra thread in there, and you'll see why. Within your accessory bag, you have an Allen wrench, and the Allen wrench is the way that you're going to change your needles, and you remove them. Use your right needle only. You can use your left needle only. And speaking of needles, what we do suggest that you use is a Schmetz needle. We like to use very good quality needles. You can use a Schmetz Universal, which is a general, it'll sew on most of your fabrics that you'll be sewing on. Or you can also use, and this is what I really dearly love about the Huskylock, a Schmetz stretch needle for your knits, for your lycras, for your sweatshirt knits, that type of thing. So your Schmetz needles are what you're going to want to use. Also, when you put your needles in, you do want to put the flat side to the back. To take a needle out, and I'm going to take my right needle out, I want to put my Allen wrench right in the front screw. Okay, there's a front screw right above that thread guide that goes through your needles. I'm going to turn counterclockwise, and you see how I'm holding both needles. When you turn counterclockwise, it does loosen both needles. At this point, I'm holding both needles, and I'm going to remove my right needle. Now, one good thing to do, which I didn't do here, is while you loosen your needles, is just don't clip that right needle thread until you have your right needle out. Because if you happen to let go of it, it won't go in your machine. It'll be held by the right needle thread. So keep that threaded if you remember. And I'm going to take that right needle out, still holding the left needle, and I'm going to tighten that left needle. Don't take this screw all the way out, because it's really hard to get back in. Okay, now for my safe lock, I still have my tensions where I had them for my decorative serging. I have my my left needle at a normal tension of 4 or 4.5. I have my right needle is totally removed, so I'm not using it. My upper looper is a little bit lower at 1.5, and that's accommodating for the thread again, and my lower looper is at normal. Let's make this actually look like a seam, like on our sweatshirt. I'm going to cut my piece of fabric in half. To do a safe lock, this is great for color blocking or putting two pieces of fabric together when you want a decorative stitch on the outside. I want to put my wrong sides, and the fleece is, of course, the furry side is the wrong side. Wrong sides together. I'm going to lift my presser foot, and I'm going to actually do a seam. Let's take my stitch width for this up to about 7. This will make a really wide one. Okay. So what this is doing is it's actually creating a seam on the outside of your fabric, or outside of your garment actually. And then what you want to do is, this is where you use your regular Viking, and you'll press this down, and at this point you'll want to stitch with a regular straight stitch on your Viking right into the serge seam, and that will hold that flat, and so you have a decorative stitch on the outside. The nice thing about this too is when you do a seam like this is it's also reversible. So you have a straight stitch on the wrong side or the right side if you turn it inside out, and you have a decorative stitch on the other side. So it really is a sturdy and a very practical way to join two pieces of fabric. Now, I did mention the flat lock, and the flat lock is used, actually I have a beautiful little baby's garment here. This is done with a 3-thread flat lock to insert the lace. That's using the right needle only. If you want a narrow flat lock, you'll want to use the right needle only. That's for applying lace in this case. If you want a wider flat lock, and we have our Keep America Sewing tote bag here, if you want a wider flat lock, for instance on the side here it's a flat lock, you'll want to of course make use the left needle and make the stitch width a little bit wider. What the flat lock does is it opens up, you'll put your fabrics wrong sides together again, and what we do for a flat lock is we take our needle tension to 0. And if you look on the wrong side of this, you'll see why we do this. See, this ladder stitch is actually my needle thread. So when you put your wrong sides together and open this up, it lays flat. You have a decorative seam on one side and you have a ladder stitch on the other. There's also a very practical way to use flat lock too, and we will go through that. Again, I've taken you always want to use just your left needle. I've taken my left needle tension all the way to 0. Okay, there are some cases where you may want to put a little bit of tension on your needle thread. I'm going to also increase my lower looper tension. The reason being is you want this to pull, you want the lower looper to work for you so it pulls nice and flat. I'm going to do my flat lock on a piece of denim with decorative thread in my upper looper. When you'll see that when I position my fabric for a flat lock, what I want to do is I want those loops to form over. Let me tighten my lower looper just a little bit. Over the top of the fabric, or over the top of the fold if you're not doing a seam. And see, I'm actually looping off the edge. My needle tension's at 0 again. It's going to look like this on the right side, and then what I do is just grasp both sides of the fabric and I'm just going to pull this flat. And what that'll do is it'll create a ladder stitch on, so usually with something heavy like denim or something heavy like the canvas for the Keep America Sewing bag. You'll have to give it a little tug. It'll lay nice and flat, and then you have your ladder stitch on the other side. A neat decorative way. This is the way that you can take a piece of fabric and decorate the inside of a fabric because you're doing the flat lock on a fold. So if you want decorative flat locks down a sweatshirt, you can just fold it where you want it and then stitch right down the fold, and you'll have decorative flat locks on the front of your sweatshirt. A practical way to use the flat lock, and I am going to change back to my regular thread for this technique, is applying lace with a flat lock. One thing that I probably should have used with this spool, or definitely with the smaller dual duty spools, is we have what we call the thread caps, and they look like this. What they do is they fit directly on top of the spool. So if you're using little spools, and like I said before, you don't always use these big cones of thread. If you're using little spools, what happens is it really helps it in reeling off very, very smoothly. So you'll want to put, if you're using a little spool like this, or like the decorative threads come in little spools too, occasionally, is you'll want to put the thread cap right directly on top of the spool. Okay. Now to change to my regular thread, let me switch back to green. Green for upper looper. Again, we've matched our threads to our looper colors just so we can see kind of how our stitches are. Let me come from the back. Used to doing this the other way. Let's come from the back this way. And I'm going to tie my upper looper thread. Okay. And what I like to just tie that in a square knot. Again, to get that needle, that looper thread through, or that knot through, what I like to do is take my looper thread to 0, and I'm just going to run that thread right through the upper looper. Okay. Now, to apply lace to the bottom of a slip, to the bottom of lingerie, actually to the side of our, let me see, I have our little tidy towel. We've applied lace, actually with decorative thread in this case, to the edge. This is a little tidy towel that hangs on your oven door. It's one of the our projects that we have done at Viking. We've applied the lace with the flat lock. You can see the ladder stitch on the opposite side, and you see how this lace lays nice and flat, and it sticks out nice and flat. That actually is very, very helpful when you're doing the lace on the bottom of a slip, because then you don't get the curling under of the seam. Let's do one. Let's take a piece of lace and a piece of tricot. Now, what I like to do is I like to leave about 1/4 of an inch of my tricot extending beyond my lace. The reason I do this is so I can cut my tricot, and it'll be a nice clean cut, and I'll just catch that lace with my needle thread. Now for this particular technique, I don't want it this wide as I did for my decorative thread, so I'm going to take my stitch width and I'm going to adjust my stitch width down to 5. I'm also going to, I don't really want the stitch length this long, so I'm going to adjust it back up to 2.5 or 3. Okay, 3 will be fine. And as I stitch, again, my needle tension, my left needle tension is at 0. I'm not using my right needle thread or my right needle at all. And I do want my upper looper tension to be back at normal because I've changed back to my regular thread. And my lower looper tension, I do want to tighten anywhere between 7 and 8, 6.5 and 8. And then I'm just going to serge the flat lock edge. Now, for the lace, what you'll want to do too is you'll want to hold it a little bit taut from the back because you're working with lightweight fabrics. And for these techniques where we're using lightweight fabrics, I do like to hold it taut from the back. I'm cutting my tricot and I'm actually catching my lace with my needle. Then what happens is I have a flat lock edge on one side and I have a ladder stitch on the other. So either side, it's your preference, whichever one you want to use as the right side. You can use the ladder stitch or you can use the flat lock side. There's lots of neat things that you can do with flat lock. For the next section, I'd like to, let's turn the page, and we're going to the rolled edge. Now, the rolled edge you've probably seen before on tablecloths, napkins. It's that beautiful rolled edge, and I have a little napkin sample here. It's the beautiful rolled edge you do see on tablecloths and napkins in both ready to wear and when you go to the restaurant, actually. To do this beautiful edge, there are several things that you need to remember. The first one is we need to snap off our foot, and we do need to snap on our rolled hem foot. And we haven't talked about snapping off your foot yet. Let's open that front cover so you can see what I'm doing a little bit better. The first thing you want to do is with your presser foot lift, you do have extra lift, and this is especially if you depress that and press up, you can see that the foot goes up. This is especially nice when you have a bulky fabric or lots of fabric that you want to serge an edge on. Quilted fabrics we sometimes use this for. To remove a foot, and this will also be important when you're putting on your accessory feet, and we will show you those later, you depress the presser foot lift for your extra lift, go to the back and press the release button. What that will do is release the foot. At this point, you want to turn that foot so it's horizontal to your body, and you want to just pull straight back. I still have my finger on the presser foot lift for that extra lift. While we have the foot off, I do want to show you another thing that's important when we do the rolled edge is to remove the stitch finger, and we haven't talked about the removable stitch finger yet either. You'll see that my threads are forming over this stitch finger right now, and that's for a normal stitch when you're stitching over the edge of a fabric or doing your normal 3 or 4 thread seam. What I want to do to remove this stitch finger is I want to pull those threads off of that stitch finger and to the back. Okay, my presser foot is up, so I do have a little bit of tension release too. I want to make sure that my lower looper is at its lowest position, or actually you can see better, your upper looper is also at its lowest position. When you do this, the guard on the removable stitch finger dial will allow you to push it in. If that stitch finger is not at its lowest, or excuse me, if the looper is not at its lowest position, the guard won't move to allow you to turn that stitch finger. So have your loopers at their lowest position, and then the guard will move. And then actually you can do this with one hand, where you can move the guard with your finger, and then go in with your thumb and just move that stitch finger away. What this does is it leaves a little pin, and the little pin is what's left so the stitch forms over this little pin and gives you that nice little rolled edge. Now, another thing we need to do is to snap on the rolled edge foot. The rolled edge foot does have an R on it, and it's a little bit different shape. The way that you want to put the rolled edge foot on, and of course, always I want my threads to be going on the right side and back. I want to again place my foot so it's horizontal to my body. And this won't go unless I have also depressed my presser foot lift, so I get that extra lift. And then let me show you the little gold pin. There's a little gold loop or extension on the back of this foot. You want that little gold extension to go in front of the extension on the side here. And you can see, let me take my presser foot down, and it should snap on. What I want you to do too is come with this foot and just, since it's a spring-loaded foot, just tap on the front of that and it'll just snap right on. When I raise my needle, you can see the little extension a little bit better, and the gold loop on the back of the foot is in front of that extension. Okay, I can close my front cover. A couple other things you want to do for a rolled edge is inside my control cover. Again, I have my adjustable stitch length and I have my adjustable stitch width. You want to take your adjustable stitch length to R, and you want to take your adjustable stitch width to R. Now, for our purposes, when we first start adjusting our tensions, and if you haven't done a lot of rolled edges, what I want you to do is take your stitch length to be a little bit longer than R, say almost 1, and we'll adjust our stitch length from there, and you'll see more of what I mean once I start doing the sample, and then you can adjust it to be as dense as you really want it. Okay, I'm still set for a flat lock here, so I do want to adjust my left needle back to normal, and I still only have my left needle in. We're sewing with left needle only. It's very important with the rolled edge. I'm going to keep my upper looper tension at normal. What's adjusted here is my lower looper tension. I want to take my lower looper tension so that it takes that thread and it curls it around to the other side a little bit tighter. So I want my lower looper tension anywhere between 7 and 9. So I'm going to start with my lower looper tension at about 7.5 or 8. Okay, now I'm going to take a piece of lightweight woven fabric and I'm going to take my presser foot down and I'm just going to start serging. If you want to do this at a little bit slower speed, I haven't mentioned full speed and half speed yet, but I do have a little button on the front that says 1 and 1/2. If you want to start and test your stitches at a slower speed, you can just adjust that down and you do have a slower speed. So let's go at a slower speed now, and I want to, when I first start doing this, let's see, I'm going to just hold this a little bit taut from the back. Again, you're working with a lightweight woven fabric, and it's just going to take that edge and it's just going to roll that. Okay, now I can go at full speed. And see how it just takes that edge and it just rolls that edge around to the back. And I'm checking my tensions, and it looks really good here because I don't see any of my needle thread and I don't see any of my lower looper thread. If you did see your lower looper thread, you would, in this case, see blue underneath. So actually the only thread you really see with a rolled edge is your upper looper thread. Okay, now if you want to take your stitch length all the way down to R and do a more dense rolled edge than this, feel free. One thread that we like to use too with our rolled edge, if you want a real puffy looking edge, is what we call woolly nylon. And woolly nylon in your upper looper is really fantastic for rolled edges, because see how you can stretch it out, it'll stretch as you're sewing, and then it just puffs up and gives you a nice dense rolled edge as you're stitching. So use that in your upper looper if you want a more denser, furrier looking rolled edge. Okay, now we're going to go to our lettuce leaf edge. Let me backtrack again to the rolled edge. Another thing you can do with a rolled edge is you can do rolled edge tassels, what we've done here, and we've just rolled over pearl cotton to make a little tassel. Lots to do with a rolled edge. Here's rolled edge again on our tidy towel with a rayon thread, or it's called pearl, it's YLI pearl crown rayon, just in the upper looper. So you can do decorative threads in your upper looper as you do your rolled edges. Here's a little rolled edge too. It doesn't look like a rolled edge, but it's been stitched down with one of our little heirloom stitches on our Viking. That's a rolled edge. So there's lots and lots of different places you can use a rolled edge. It's very, very nice when using it in home decorating. One thing I do like to show too when we're talking about rolled edge is called the lettuce edge finish. This is a little lettuce edge finish done on the Art of Sewing 3 garment. What we've done is done double ribbing. We applied the ribbing. Actually, we lettuce leaf the ribbing first, and then we sewed on the ribbing to finish the edge. But see how it just takes it and it curls that edge. You stretch it as you serge the rolled edge. We'll do that right now. You remember the little ribbing sample that I have that I previously did. What I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust my stitch length a little bit longer. Since we're stretching and since we're lettuce leafing, I'm going to adjust this to about 2. Okay. Then I'm going to take the edge. I'm going to see that everything's okay. So I'm going to take the edge of my ribbing, and I'm just going to stitch along the edge of my ribbing, and I'm going to stretch. You don't really want to cut that ribbing, but you just want to, if you don't want to cut and you want to serge along the edge, just use the side of your foot as a guide, or use the side of the cutter as a guide and just stitch along the edge. Another way to not use a cutter too is the blind hem foot or the multi-purpose foot, and I'll be showing you that. So what we want to do is just stretch that as we sew it. And see how you get the little lettuce leafing? I could have even stretched it a little bit harder there. So you have the little lettuce leafed edge. Okay. The picot edge, I think, is very versatile as far as garment construction is concerned. If you're making scarves, that type of thing, any place that you want your rolled edge to be a little bit lighter and not so heavy along the edge. I like to do it along a rayon skirt where it's not quite as dense as a rolled edge. The way to get a rolled edge not quite so dense is to take your stitch length a little bit longer than we had it even for the lettuce leaf edge. I'm going to take my stitch length to in between 3 and 4. I'm going to take it all the way to about a little past the 3. Another thing that you can do so it rolls under a little bit more is you can take your stitch width. I could do the lettuce leaf with this stitch width on R, or I can take the stitch width and I can adjust the stitch width just a little bit wider so that it's rolling under just a little bit more. So now I'm going to take my edge, and remember, for a lightweight fabric, I do have my stitch length a little bit long for a lightweight fabric, so do hold your, you can see the little tail coming out of the back. Do hold that tail a little bit taut as it comes out, and the fabric a little bit taut, because using a little bit longer stitch length with a lightweight fabric, it just makes a nicer edge. See that? See how it's a lot airier than the rolled edge is. So and see how we've rolled under a little bit more than if we had the stitch width just on R. Okay, pin tucks. Another neat thing to do with rolled edges is pin tucks. Actually, this is my unfinished blouse. And this was the piece of fabric, and I thought, oh, should I show this or not? But this is a great thing to do, because what you're doing is you're actually creating fabric. So I've created a piece of fabric, and I've done the pin tucks on lines that I drew with a fadeaway marker. I've inserted the lace with a pin tuck, actually, and that's the rolled edge. And then more pin tucks on this side. Now you'll notice that the pin tucks on the edge are done with variegated thread. If you use variegated thread, of course you're going to get some, this is a pastel variegated thread that goes blue, yellow, green, pink, and it really makes a beautiful finish. And that would go in my upper looper. But this would be the piece that I cut my front out of, and I will do that someday. To do a pin tuck, I first mark, I pre-marked my pin tuck lines with a fadeaway or a water-soluble marker. I'm going to take my stitch length back to a shorter length where I was maybe a little bit longer at 1.5 for a little bit lighter rolled edge, and I'm going to take my stitch width back to R. I'm still using the rolled edge foot, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stitch a rolled edge right along that edge. Like I say, if you use decorative threads for this, it's just gorgeous. Okay, I'm going to hold it a little bit taut from the back. I actually could go a little bit lighter on this too, but it makes a really nice pin tuck. There's one pin tuck, and then if I want the second pin tuck, I'm going to do the second pin tuck. There are some wonderful books available on heirloom serging. You could do lace insertions, you can do pin tucks like I'm doing. Just some beautiful things you can do with heirloom serging, pin tucks, lace insertion, that type of thing. So there are your pin tucks with your rolled edge. So you would just mark as many as you want and do as many pin tucks as you like. Okay, the next part, I really like this technique. It's the spaghetti strap technique. If you want to do little straps for evening wear or little straps for a nightgown or for lingerie, what you can do is cut a strip that's about an inch or inch and a half wide. You can go 2 inches too. I'm going to run a chain as long as I want that spaghetti strap. Let's make ours this long. What you want to do, remember you're still on a rolled edge setting. I still have the rolled edge foot on. I still have the stitch length to R, stitch width to R. I'm going to lift my presser foot. I'm going to bring this forward. I'm going to wrap my strip around this thread tail, and it's going to fit right in that fold, and then I'm going to take my presser foot down. And what you have to make sure is that you don't catch your chain in your stitching. And so I'm going to hold that chain right along that fold. And I'm going to lengthen my stitch length just a little bit on this tricot, depending on what type of fabric that you have. And I'm just going to stitch right along. I'm going to catch that tail at the back, and I'm just going to stitch, and I'm not going to catch that thread tail in my stitching. There we go. I'm not going to cut it off at the end either. Okay, now what you're going to do is use that thread tail to pull your strap through. Let me get this. And it will, you want to use a lightweight fabric, and it'll just pull that right through, just like so. And then you have your spaghetti strap. And what that does is it leaves a little rolled hem seam right inside. So then you can use your strap for belt caddies, for a lingerie strap, for evening wear, anything that you really need a little strap like that. It really beats taking a pin and trying to pull it through or push it through with the pencil. We're going to talk a little bit about differential feed now. I'm going to take off my foot and I'm going to show you, since I have to change my foot anyway, back to the regular foot. Again, I'm going to push on the foot release, take the foot so it's horizontal to my body, take it back, and I'm going to, let's open this. I'm going to pull those stitches off that stitch finger just so I know where my thread tails are. It's nice to leave, every time you do a seam, it's nice to leave about a 4 to 6 inch tail behind. Don't cut your serged tail real close to your fabric, because you have more of a leeway as far as having a handle to hold something, and you also have some thread chain to start with. When we talk about differential feed, I'm going to put my stitch finger back too before I start talking about differential feed. I'm going to take my upper looper to its lowest position. I'm going to depress the guard around my stitch finger, and I'm going to turn the dial so that it fits right into place. Now, while I have the foot off, you can see that a serger or a Huskylock has differential feed. What that means is it has 2 sets of feed teeth, and you can see where they're split right there. What's happening with differential feed is you're regulating how these feed teeth move to each other. Within the front control cover, I said that the farthest lever on the left is your differential feed control. We've been sewing up to this point where our differential feed is on 1.0, or that means that 1 to 1. That means that both of these feed teeth are moving at the same rate. Now, if I put my differential feed to 2, what that means is it's going to run those front feed teeth faster, and it's going to push my fabric in if I needed to pull something together as a knit, and I'll show you how to do that. I'll show you actually what it does. On the contrary, if I move this to 0.7, what it's going to do is it's going to move those front feed teeth slower. And if I want Therefore, the back feed teeth are pulling and holding that fabric taut underneath. And let's do a couple things using our differential feed. Let's start with our differential feed at 1. I'm going to put my tensions back to normal. And remember, normal is all 4s. I'm going to put my stitch length back to a normal setting, which is 3. I'm going to put my stitch width back to a normal setting, which is 5. And I'm also going to snap on my regular foot. And remember, use the extra lift. I did that kind of fast. I'll do it again, just so you know. We're going to put it horizontal to our body. The gold extension in front of the pin on the side, come down, and then if you want to make sure it's on there, just lift a little bit on the front. Okay, another thing I want to do is I want to put my right needle back in, and I'm going to take away the guard to do this, just so I'm all the way in there. I'm going to hold both needles again, flat side to the back. I'm going to loosen the clamp screw, and I'm just going to insert those needles as far as they go. And then I'm going to use my Allen wrench, and I'm just going to tighten those down. Okay, make sure they're in there tight. Remember, don't take that screw all the way out. And then I'm going to take my right needle. I'm just going to take that out because I don't know where it is, and I'm just going to rethread it. See how easy that is? Clip it off so it's a new little edge to put through the eye of my needle. Try one more time here. Again, if you want to use your tweezers at this point, I'm kind of manipulating my finger around and grabbing it, but if you want to, tweezers may make it easier for you to grab that thread too. I can see that. By the way, the needles, I can see that my needle's down a little bit too far, but the right needle does go down a little bit lower than the left needle, so don't be concerned if they're not even on the bottom. Okay, back to differential feed. If we're serging on lightweight woven fabrics, where differential feed really is beneficial, and you've probably had on the insides of your lining where it tends to pucker, or on lightweight fabrics, especially synthetic fabrics, tend to pucker along the seam. Let me see, let's just run a stitch here. This is just at normal differential feed. And it's not bad, but you see that you tend to get a couple of little puckers right here, little gathers. To eliminate that, what we're going to do is we're going to put our differential feed, again, push your lever to the right and up to 0.7. This is going to run those front feed teeth slower, and it's going to hold my fabric taut under the presser foot. And let's run it and see what happens here. See, you can see there's not as many puckers along this seam as there are along this seam. Okay? Using the positive differential feed, what we use it on mostly is your sweater knits or your knits, your cotton interlocks. I use differential feed. If we put our differential feed back to 1, I'm going to serge along the edge. Again, I'm going to lengthen my stitch length just a little bit. Actually, for this heavy sweater knit, I'm going to lengthen it to 4. And I'm going to use my extra lift because it's a pretty heavy sweater knit. On 1, and this is sometimes how it comes out of your regular conventional sewing machine, is, see, this is an undesirable seam because it wavers. Okay. To eliminate that wavering, what you want to do is you want to take your differential feed to 2. It's going to run those front feed teeth faster, and take that and just run it through, and I'll show you. It kind of works like your fingers do, taking it and just pulling it through. Got a little tuck there. And see the difference? A big difference. If you knit your own yardage for cut and sew garments, differential feed is just mandatory, because then you don't get seams like this. If you make things with cotton interlock, that type of thing, it is very, very beneficial to have differential feed. And on your Huskylock 900 you do. For gathering, this is another place that we do use differential feed. Remember, if my front feed teeth are moving faster, what it's going to do to a regular woven lightweight fabric is take this and it's going to gather this. To get more gathers, what you want to do is take your stitch length to 5. You want the longest stitch length, and then as you serge, if you hold your finger behind, see how I'm holding my finger behind the presser foot, and what that does is it inhibits the passage of the fabric, so it's not pulling off the back, and it's helping you get a nicer, more even gather. So you get a little gather like so. Now, if you want a gather that's tighter even than this is enough for some things, is you want to take both of your needle tensions, and I've tightened them all the way up to 9. My stitch length, again, is on its longest, and the differential feed is at 2. I'm going to take another piece. What this will do is gather this fabric even more. Again, put your finger behind the presser foot. It'll sound a little bit different. What you need to do, too, is when you get to the end of your edge, instead of just chaining off with your needle tensions this tight, I always take my needle tensions back to the normal tension, which is 4, and that's easy to do because all of the tensions are shaded, and you can just quickly turn the tension dial back to normal, and then see how tight this gather is. The nice thing about this gather is that it's adjustable. So what I usually do is I gather it all up, and then I adjust this down. So you can adjust this all the way out if you want. So an adjustable gather, much, much easier than taking bobbin threads and trying to gather that way. I want to talk about the optional accessory feet that are available from your Viking dealer. Optional accessory feet are developed to make your serging easier. If you do a lot of elastic applications, we have an elastic foot. If you do a lot of blind hems, we have a blind hem foot. And if you apply pearls, we have a pearl foot. So what I want to talk about first is the blind hem foot. The blind hem foot has a little well on the side. Let me get rid of those. Has a little well on the side. What this does is the little well goes against the cutter blade, but it also acts as a guide while you're doing your blind hem, or if you want to go along an edge without cutting, you can also use this well. Let's put the blind hem foot on, or the multi-purpose foot is what it's called, because it's for more than just blind hems. It's for any time you want to serge and have your fabric protected from that blade. If there's an edge you want to go around and absolutely not cut. Snap on our multi-purpose foot. You see how that well just goes along to the cutting blade. That is adjustable, so I can adjust that anywhere I want. If I do a blind hem, again, let's do a blind hem fold, where you fold up as much as you want hemmed. Let's go about 1.5 inches here. And then you fold this back. I'm going to be cutting just a little bit along this edge, and the well of my foot is going to be riding right along this fold. Let's put this right underneath, and see how the well of the foot rides right along that fold. What you want to happen with a blind hem is you just want your left needle to catch that fold. Again, like the elastic casing, if you're doing this in the round, I would cut a place for your cutter, and see how if you cut a place like that, it'll just fit right in there and you're ready to serge. Now, a couple things we need to do with our tensions, which will make our blind hem nicer, is to take my left needle to 2. I'm going to decrease my left needle tension a little bit. I'm going to take my upper looper tension to 7. What this will do is on your blind hem, it'll bring it closer. It'll flip it up to your fabric, and I'll show you that when I'm done. Your lower looper you want to keep at 4, which is normal. Okay, with the well of the foot next to the fold of your fabric, you do, let me take my differential feed back to 1, okay, back to 1, because you don't need all that differential feed, especially when you're doing a blind hem, unless it's on a very stretchy sweater knit or a very stretchy knit, cotton interlock. Another thing I want to mention about differential feed, as long as we're talking about knits and cotton interlocks, is you don't have to use that differential feed all the way at 2. You can use the differential feed anywhere in between that. For instance, if you're using a knit fabric like this dress, it doesn't stretch quite as much as a sweater knit. What you want to do is put it halfway in between, maybe 1.5. Okay, so I'm going to take that back to 1, and I'm going to keep my stitch length the longest, and I'm just going to serge my blind hem. My left needle is just catching that fold. Okay, and you can see the reason that I made my upper looper tension a little bit tighter is this will pull, and this will pull this up a little bit better. Okay, now if you can see your stitches like this, I'm using yellow thread. What you want to do is move your well over a little bit. Let me grab a piece of sweatshirt, please. Okay, fold up my blind hem. You can move that well over to the left. Then you're catching less. So if you take the little dial, let's move the well over a little bit. It'll just barely catch that edge. Remember, your stitch length is the longest. Okay. And then that's much better. That's much better. Okay? All right. Another optional foot is what we call the elastic taping foot. The elastic taping foot has, let me get my elastic, has a tension dial on the front, and you can see that right now it's at 4. I'm going to adjust that tension down to 0 to insert my elastic. What you want to do is put your elastic right into the slot here, and then close the door or flip the lever over so it's snug against your elastic. And then I'm going to tighten the tension on that dial. Let's have it about, let's tighten it all the way to 4 right now. I always insert my elastic into my foot before I put my foot on. It's a lot easier to do it that way. I'm going to snap on my foot. All the optional feet are snap on and off too, so it makes it very handy. Okay. Take my threads so they're to the right and back. Make sure that my stitch length is at its longest. I want to take my tensions all to normal. Now, sometimes when I am applying elastic with the elastic foot, I like to tighten both needle tensions just to about the top of that normal shaded area, about 5.5. Take a piece of tricot, and the elastic foot acts as a guide, and what the tension disc does is it actually stretches your elastic as you're sewing it on or as you're serging it on. So let's serge. Let's just hold this, just hold it a little bit firm from the top, and you'll see that my Huskylock is just serging that elastic right on. When you get to the end, let's just clip off the elastic, serge right off. See that? How it just stitches that elastic right on and stretches it as you serge. Okay? It's nice for swimwear. It's nice for slips. Any of your active wear, the elastic foot is very, very handy to have, and it really does make that process a lot faster. If you want to apply tape with your elastic foot, you can do this in the same manner. If you put your tape right into the tension slot, and then I don't take the tension all the way down to 4 when I apply tape, about 3. What that'll do is hold your tape as you serge it on, as you serge a seam. Now, the place that really comes to mind that we did that is when we serged our shoulder seam on a sweater knit like this, and what that does is it stabilizes the shoulder seam, so we stitched it right into the shoulder seam. Okay, we have clear elastic in that one, and you can use clear elastic on a sweater knit. It'll make it stretch a little bit easier. The last optional foot I want to talk about today is what we call the purl beading foot. And the purl beading foot is an easy way to feed pearls or beads underneath your Huskylock. On the reef that we've done here, we've serged them right along the edge, and what they've done, and there's green beads all the way, or green pearls all the way around our wreath, and we've just serged them on because what happens is they fit right in the well under the foot, and that's what guides it along as we serge. Pearls are available from your Viking dealer, and we use the pearls by the yard, and they come like this in a container, and you can just cut them to how long you want, or you can stick this on the floor and you can serge as many pearls on as you want. I'm going to cut a little string of pearls here. I'm going to snap on my pearl beading foot, same way I snap on all of the feet, down, and just make sure it's on. Okay, it is important that we use our left needle only for the pearl beading foot, so I'm going to snip. No, I'm not. I'm going to leave my needle threaded this time, because I want to show you if I would drop that needle, then that needle is held by that thread. Okay. See, the needle's held by the thread, so don't clip that off yet. Now we're going to tighten our left needle down. Okay. So it's important to use your, now I'm going to snip this off. It's important to use your left needle only with the pearl beading foot. I'm going to take my loopers to their lowest position. I'm going to do pearls along a fold. Now, pearls along a fold, you can use the flat lock stitch if you want, the regular stitch if you want. If you do pearls along the fold, then you can get pearls in the middle of a fabric. So I'm going to go back to the flat lock stitch. I'm going to take my stitch length to 3. Okay. Remember, for a flat lock, you want to take your left needle tension to 0, and you want to increase your lower looper tension to about 7.5. I'm going to insert my pearls underneath my foot, and if you can see that you want to put your pearls under the curved extension on the rear of the foot, and you want to set them right in the well on the front of the foot. Then I'm going to just lay those there right now, and I'm going to take a piece of regular fabric here. Let's take a piece of medium weight woven fabric, and I'm going to serge these on with a flat lock. Take my presser foot down. Actually, remember, it won't let you sew with your presser foot up. I'm going to take my presser foot down, and I'm just going to serge those right on. My stitch length is, remember, at 3. You can lengthen it or shorten it depending on how big your pearls are, but see how they just guide those pearls right along. Actually, if I was doing this on a fold in the middle of a shirt, I wouldn't want to cut at all. And then you have your flat lock stitch. I'm going to pull that out because I do have tension release. And I'm going to clip this off. And then I'm just going to open this up. Remember how we opened up the flat lock? See how you can just apply pearls in the center of a fabric. Okay. Remember, you don't really want to cut your fabric if you're serging pearls in the center of a fabric. Another thing that you can do so that the top thread does not show, and for your upper looper, is to use the transparent thread in your upper looper. And then this thread won't show, and it'll look like your pearls are just floating on your fabric. I've had a great time using the monofilament thread in the upper looper of my Huskylock, putting the tiny pearls around a wedding veil or around the bottom of a wedding dress, and it just is a very, very pretty finish. It's been a joy helping you learn your brand new Huskylock 900. I hope you've had as much fun as I have. Be sure and visit your local Viking dealer. He'll show you some of the newer threads that are out, some of the newer notions, books, and even some of the cabinets like I'm sitting at right now. I'm sure you'll also want to take a look at the new carrying case that's available for your Huskylock 900 so that you can take it anywhere you want to go. And I'm sure you'll want to do that because I'm sure you'll have loads of fun.